Welcome to part 2 of my book, Secret Society of the Shamans. The book is no longer in print, and I've decided to bring it to you chapter by chapter here on YouTube, and I hope that you will find it interesting. So, Chapter 2, Mystery Religions of the Northeast Michigan Woodlands. For those of you who have never visited Northeast Michigan, let me tell you a little bit about it. The coastline forms the west shore of Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes. Lake Huron figures prominently in religious beliefs and customs of this section. Huron's beaches are for the most part sandy, and during the summer provide some of the most delightful tanning spots to be found. Oddly though, as you move north from the small city of Harrisville, 10 miles along the lake shore, to the ghost town of Black River, and then still further north, about 4 more miles, you'll find that the beach and atmosphere make a dramatic shift. At this point, you're miles from anywhere, water on one side and dense pine forest on the other. Suddenly, the sandy beach gives way to rocks and pebbles, creating a very harsh look. The air here takes on a chill even during the hot summer, and it is here that thousands of years ago the great glaciers, which carved out this hilly area, stopped and deposited the rubble which is strewn on the lakeshore. But this stretch of beach lasts only about 4 miles. Further north, about 1.5 miles, the pine forest suddenly gives way to an abrupt clearing, where no trees grow, and the wild grass never attains a height of more than 2 or 3 feet. Here you are at the precipice of a great unsolved mystery, but only one of many possible interconnected mysteries that dot this ancient area. This area is known locally as South Point, named for a small finger-like peninsula of land which juts out into the lake. The rocky beach here begins to once more give way to the sand. However, just under the surface of the sand are large rocks, and as you walk from the small peninsula into the clearing, these large stones look as though they were placed purposely to form a large walkway. In years past, Jerry Wagner, a local historian, excavated from this site a large thunderbird effigy made of a green stone boulder. The thunderbird, which was revered by the natives who lived here. And as you walk in from the lakeshore, the land takes an abrupt rise. In the shoreline, there is a large depression, a dugout area now overgrown with grass, and it is enough for now to know that this chamber of sorts is here, and I will discuss it more later on. Walking through the clearing, you cannot help asking yourself why the pine forest is so close but has not filled in this clearing. Mr. Wagner speculated in times past perhaps something unusual or unnatural occurred that contaminated the land. At the edge of the clearing, the trees begin once more a profuse growth, and at the edge of the clearing is found what is locally known as a stone well. It is a hole about 5 feet deep, lined with stones in a dry construction manner, that is to say, no mortar was used. In a short distance among the trees is a great mystery. This is all known locally as the Black River Stoneworks. This is a series of so-called stone fences which form a rectangular shape and cover about 2 acres of ground. Periodically in the walls are breaks or gate-like openings. The stones are loosely but neatly piled, and in height are about 3 to 4 feet. Surrounding the walls are conical piles of stones about 4.5 feet tall. From our cultural perspective, no practical use for these stoneworks can be arrived at. Such stone fences and piles are found throughout the United States and are particularly significant in terms of burial practices, and thus passage into the next plane of existence. In Michigan, they can possibly be tied to the bizarre Feast of the Dead, which will be described shortly. Salvatore Michael Torrento, in his book, The Search for Lost America, Contemporary Books, 1978, says of these mysterious stone piles, stone heaps come in many shapes and sizes. Some are as large as 60 feet in diameter and 8 feet in height, while others are little more than 2 feet by 2 feet. Endless speculation has arisen over the origin and function of the cairns, piles, and James Adair, whose History of the American Indian appeared in 1775, felt that the Indians raised those heaps merely to do honor to their dead and incite the living to the pursuit of virtue. Earlier books all mention passing Indians throwing rocks onto existing piles, and even Washington Irving, high above the Hudson River at his dreamy Sunnyside estate, told of a similar story in a fanciful essay that he entitled Traits of the Indian Character. Now, Elton Davis, a popular historian archaeologist, told me of his thoughts pertaining to the mysterious stoneworks at Black River. And I want to interrupt reading this right here. I forgot this was in here, and it's really personally kind of funny. Elton Davis was a pen name that I used at one time, so it's actually, I guess, me giving my opinions to me. But anyways, I'll carry on. My ex-wife Kathy and I first hiked up there during the summer of 1986. It was fascinating, to say the least, and we made many additional trips as time went on. We took numerous stereo photographs which identify both the stone piles as well as the stone walls. Each of the stone piles is hollowed out. In a number of the piles, trees have grown up, attesting to their age. Having done much work over the years at South Point, I can say that there's a commingling of cultures at this site. That is to say, I have personally seen many artifacts from this site that are only as old as the 1850s, but there are also relics of great antiquity, celts, arrowheads, and which leaves no doubt as to the Indian influence here. There's a large boulder on a path not far from the stoneworks, which surface is pecked away at, and there's no doubt, that it was used as a ceremonial mortar. Now, another interesting feature of the stone walls, they ramble. They run straight for 100 feet, then for no apparent rhyme or reason, unexpectedly veer off to acute right angles. Within their confines, however, exist many stone piles. Some are 12 feet or more across and 5 feet in height. It is possible for a man to climb down into the center of these conical piles and remain standing there. End quote. Great pains were employed to make certain these stone piles endured the ages. Very specific stones were selected and carefully fitted into place, but care was always of the utmost concern when preparing these sites, which may have been portals for the soul to cross over to the next world. No excavations have, to my knowledge, yet been conducted at this site, nor are any planned, which might confirm their exact purpose. Nonetheless, we may speculate upon their purpose from other stone piles which have been excavated. As an example, I will again turn to Mr. Trento's book, The Search for Lost America. Trento states in the late 1880s, the Smithsonian Institution excavated a mound on a farm near Patterson, North Carolina, and discovered some surprising remains. Agents for the institution showed that several skeletons and stone piles had been simultaneously buried beneath an earthen mound. The piles accompanying the skeletons seemed to confirm age-old legends about the sites being repositories for the dead. The Black River site compares favorably with the site located at Ramapo, New York. There is found a tremendous construction of stone walls covering nearly 200 acres. The network of walls also consists of many stone piles, and like the Black River site, this New York site is located in a heavily wooded area near a freshwater source. Purely speculative, of course, but might not in the Indian mind so used to traveling the waterways with his birch bark and dugout canoes, have visualized the spirits of his dead comrades as using these waterways to pass to the land of the souls, thus their close placement to the waters. About 200 feet from the stoneworks is a depression in the high lakeshore. Local archaeologist Jerry Wagner years ago conducted excavations of his own into this unusual feature and found that it had at one time been used around the 1850s. I suggest, though, that it may have been used then, but that its original use was much earlier and in connection with the stone fences and piles. Mr. Wagner found pieces of old china as well as antique spoons and forks, and also went through reddish sand where timbers had long ago rotted to their base elements, and such chambers are not unusual in connection with fences and piles in other areas of the country. In New England, many of these chambers still exist as they were made from stone slabs, but at Black River, no slab stones could be found, and so the next best material was employed, wood. In particular, 4 miles from the stonework in Thompson, Connecticut, a group of 5 slab-roof chambers were located, and like the Black River chamber, these are relatively small, 10 feet in diameter and 4 feet in height, almost the exact dimensions of the Black River chamber. An unusual feature indeed, but gut instinct speaks to me that this was the point of departure for the souls to take sail across Lake Huron. The chamber is, by the way, at the edge of the mysterious clearing spoken of earlier. There is another interesting similarity between the Black River stoneworks and those found in New York. The New York stoneworks, located near a large 10 by 7 foot cut stone block that was conceived by the Shohola Indians as being the eye of the universe. You must picture this site to feel the spiritual forces that radiate from it. It is located on the Shohola Creek in an opening in the forest, a restful setting which would induce meditation on one's self and nature. The local Indians, it is said, came from miles around to meditate on this stone, as to them it was the center of creation. The Black River Stoneworks is not far from the center of Indian religious beliefs throughout the northeast woodlands, that being Mackinac Island. All powerful of the spirits to these Indians was the turtle spirit, and Mackinac was thought to be the great turtle. Indeed, as you observe it from the mainland, it looks much like a tremendous turtle swimming in the Straits of Mackinac. Mackinac Island was considered the earthly abode of dwelling place of Gitchimanitu, the Great Spirit, the supreme god. The waters that caress the shell of the turtle, the mystical great turtle, are those of none other than that of Lake Huron. Mackinac is bathed in legends of the northern woodland Indians. It is to them the eye of the universe, just as the great cut stone slab of New York. By the way, that slab is in itself an enigma, as with the tools the Indians of that region had, they could not possibly cut such a stone block. But if they couldn't, then who did? We'll return to Black River in a bit, but while we are at Mackinac Island, let's just skip about 5 miles over the waters to the town of St. Ignace. Here, a mass grave was discovered and excavated some time ago, and this mass grave was the repository for bones gathered together for what is known as the Feast of the Dead. In fact, bones from as far away as Black River may have ended up in this mass grave. The souls sailed out from South Point across Lake Huron to the next world, but the bones may have traveled north up Lake Huron to St. Ignace. Let's take a look at this unusual feast. The Feast of the Dead was held about every 12 years or so, as ordered by the council of neighboring villages. At this time, the remains of those who had died and had been buried individually were dug up and brought together for a feast with the living, and what a feast it was. The job of carrying the bones of their relatives from the cemetery fell to the women, and if the flesh had not all been consumed, then it was up to the ladies to clean and cleanse the bones. The bones were wrapped up in fine new beaver skins and adorned with beads and necklaces that were provided by friends and family. W. Vernon Kennetts, in his informative book Indians of the Western Great Lakes, 1675 to 1760, reported, "The contributors would say, 'Behold, here is what I give for the bones of my father, my mother, my uncle, my cousin, or other relatives.' And putting them in a new sack, they carry them on their backs, and they also decorate the top of the sack with a number of little ornaments, necklaces, bracelets, and other embellishments. Then the pelt, hatchets, kettles, and other things that they reckon of value, with a quantity of provisions, are also carried to their destination. And when all are assembled there, they put their food in one place to be used in a feast, which are a great expense to them, and then hang up decently in the cabins of their hosts all their sacks and pelts, while awaiting the day on which all must be buried in the ground. Outside the village, a large and deep pit is dug, which will accommodate the bones and grave offerings. On the precipice of the pit was built a large platform. Very special care was taken in the preparation of the pit. It was lined on the bottom and side with beaver skins and robes. Then the grave goods were placed in using a layered fashion. For example, axes, then kettles, then beads, necklaces, bracelets, and so on. This completed, the chief from the platform dumped out all the bones from the sacks into the pit, among all that merchandise. All this is then covered with dirt, and wooden poles were pounded into the ground around the pit. A covering was affixed to the poles, and the covering was made sturdy, made to last as long as possible. A missionary, Brebeuf, in 1636, wrote about the feast in such a way as to truly bring it to life. Of the conclusion of the feast, he did particular justice when he related, and I quote, "As we drew nearer, we saw nothing less than a picture of hell. The large space, or pit, was quite full of fires and flames, and the air resounded in all directions with the confused voices of these Indians. Their noise ceased, however, for some time, and they began to sing, but in voices so sorrowful and laborious that it represented to us the horrible sadness and the abyss of despair into which these unhappy souls are forever plunged. End quote. To call these souls unhappy called for a judgment on the author, but in fact, I would assume that the participants being buried were viewed as quite happy. His account continues, and I quote again, "Nearly all the souls were thrown in when we arrived, for it was done almost in the turning of a hand. Each one had made haste, thinking there would not be enough room for all the souls. We saw, however, enough of it to judge of the rest. There were 5 or 6 in the pit, arranging the bones with poles as they were dumped in. The pit was full within about 2 feet. They turned back over the bones and the robes which bordered the edge of the pit and covered the remaining space with mats and bark. Then they heaped the pit with sand, poles, and wooden stakes, which they threw in without any order. Some women brought to it some dishes of corn, and that day and the following day several cabins of the village provided nets quite full of corn, which were thrown upon the pit. But I have digressed." Well, end quote, anyways. But I have digressed far too much. Let's make our way back down Lake Huron shore to South Point and the mystery there. The stone fences, pits, and the unusual chamber are all part of the religious expression of the Indians dwelling in the pine forest of the northeast Michigan woodlands. From South Point, Thunder Bay begins. Thunder Bay is unusual, as you need to camp at South Point but once to discover how the bay got its name. There is, at certain times, the unmistakable sound of thunder produced by some phenomenon unknown to me. My ex-wife and I both were amazed by this numerous trips to the stoneworks. At Thunder Bay, near the city of Alpena, Michigan, and on the site of the Alpena Community College, was made another unique find, also of religious significance to the natives of the area. What was found there are known as the Nabcauzoan discs. Picture, if you will, a harsh, windswept bay. This body of water abounds with dangers which were inflicted upon the native travelers by the spirits unless they were somehow appeased by offerings of some sort. Visualize also an Indian shaman attempting to devise a way to ensure safety for his people who were forced to cross these waters or even dwell on their shores. Over 200 discs made of shale have been found at 4 sites clustered around the mouth of Thunder Bay. These were manufactured here. Many of the discs are blank. However, many bear inscribed images of spiritual entities who were very powerful to the Indians of the Northeast. In fact, many of the images can also be found on the birch bark scrolls of the Midewiwin, as described in Chapter 1, Part 1. Prominently displayed is the evil form of Mishipishu, who was found on no less than 16 discs. Mishipishu is a wicked mountain lion who is believed to live beneath the waters of the Great Lakes. The creature is said to cause violent storms by the movement of its great tail. Perhaps these amulets, if you will, were devised to do honor to the wicked one and thus appease him. But sacrifices were also made to Mishipishu of tobacco and sacred dogs. Other disc amulets recovered may have been made to invoke or evoke the protective power of the entities inscribed on them. Nagig, the great otter, who figures highly in the creation myth, is also among the roster of spiritual figures depicted. The great otter, as discussed in Chapter 1, is a basic symbolism for the righteous in the Midewiwin society. Otter skin was a preferred material for use in the medicine bags used in the Midewiwin ceremonies. Animiki, the great thunderbird, is also represented. His power was vast, and the creature was both feared and revered. According to tradition, the thunderbirds live above the western sky. They have control of over thunder and lightning, both powerful forces of nature. Allegedly, the lightning bolts which the thunderbirds are able to throw are used to deter the actions of the evil spirits, such as Mishipishu. Less important on the discs would appear to be Moz, the moose. His image appears on a single disc. Amik, the beaver, also appears on a disc, and perhaps most importantly is the depiction of the tree. The tree of life on discs. I'd like to quote a passage from Nabkazoan discs from Northeast Michigan by Charles E. Cleland and Richard D. Clute and Robert Haltinier. It appeared in the Mid-Continental Journal of Archaeology in 1984. They reported that, and I quote, "The most frequent and most enigmatic of the symbols on the discs of the Haltinier collection shows what appears to represent a tree rising from the mountain. This symbol represents the great medicine tree, Mishigizik, which the Algonquin mythology is identified with the northern white cedar and is the source of herbal knowledge. Mishigizik grows at the center of the earth and symbolically interconnects the four vertical layers of the Algonquin cosmos, that is, the underworld, the earth, the air, and the sky above." Also found on the discs is a star symbol, not unlike the starburst design of the pendant in Chapter 1, and the meaning of this symbol is obscured by the mists of time, of course. That stones should be used in the manufacture of amulets is not at all surprising, as stones themselves were believed by the Indians to have great power. The power of the stones and their great significance will be detailed in a later chapter. Between Alpena and South Point is the small community of Ossineek, and running near Ossineek is the Devil River. Here is another of those very mysterious places where the spirits seem to congregate. Shingaba, the divine chief, put down many image stones along the banks of the Devil River. In fact, Ossineek means image stone. The chief told his people that when he died, his spirit would come back to the place of the image stones at the mouth of the Devil River. At the mouth of the Devil River, which was named because of the big marshes there that were very difficult to cross, there stood in 1839 two ancient stones worshipped as sacred by the Indians of the area. One was composed of gneiss with varying bands of quartz, and it is said that it had the appearance of being worked into the shape by the action of the water. Its estimated weight was over 300 pounds. The second stone was about 4 feet long and resembled the shape of a man's body minus head, arms, and legs. One very old document describes it as, quote, "having the appearance of having been molded from lake sand, the surface being concreted with some substance resembling bark. It was hard on the outside but soft and crumbly inside," end quote. These stories had mysterious powers, or stones had mysterious powers, as was attested to by the report penned by David O. Oliver, an historian of the Thunder River country back in the 1870s. According to this report, the origin of these sacred stones, about which hovered the spirits of the divine chief Shingabwa, is lost in antiquity, but it is handed down in legend that hostile tribesmen raided the sacred grounds of the Chippewas, captured two of the latter, and taking their captives and the sacred stones in a canoe, started across Thunder Bay. Reaching the middle of the bay, they threw overboard the stones, and the water immediately boiled up and drowned the raiders, while the captive Chippewa safely returned to the shore in the canoe, only to find the stones back in their former place. The sacred stones are no longer on the banks of the river. It seemed that when the people they served were gone, so also was their power. It is said that during the mid-1800s, a fisherman who put ashore at the mouth of the river needed anchors for his fishing nets, and took the stones for that purpose. This time, they did not make a supernatural return as they had before, but now presumably rest somewhere on the bottom of Lake Huron. Although it has little bearing on the religious beliefs of the Indians who inhabited this mystical area, it is interesting to note that both sides of the Devil River were occupied by Indian burial grounds. In a burial mound by the river was found a trepanned human skull, showing that these ancients of the Huron shores, who are considered by science as not having achieved a very high degree of civilization, were actually capable of brain surgery. Also adding to the mystique and charm of the spirit-inhabited area is the fact that the limestone soil is so heavily impregnated with meteorites, reportedly weighing from half a pound to half a ton. These dropped at some unknown time in the past, when, as legend has it, the tail of a meteorite sideswiped the earth. The Lake Huron shores are indeed a mystical place, where the spirits of the past dwell and perhaps still influence the lives of those yet living upon these lake shores. Certainly not all the stones of the Lake Huron region have lost their power, as you will learn in Part 3. So thank you for listening. hope that you enjoyed. If you haven't done so yet, be sure you check out part 1, and part 3 will be coming up in about a week. Have a great afternoon. God bless.